Good afternoon. This is fun, isn't it? I've had a great time talking with many of you. Fred Bruning, I can recall being out at the grazing conference, and Bert Teichert was talking about grazing grass for 365 days a year. And I worked with Don Adams at the Goodmanson Ranch on projects grazing for 365 days a year. And then Ken Ing comes to us and says, let's pen them up. Wow, that turned things over, didn't it? Well, I would have to say, Dave, you remind me of one of the most fun things in my career has been new things. And I can, working with you on the E. coli project, I didn't even know that the 0157 was an O, not a 0 when we started, okay? But it was a great experience. So working on this project, Ken, thank you. It's been fun. Makes me feel young again. There ought to be laughter with that. Anyway, I've added Andrea Watson on my list of Carlos people that are involved because I thought she needed the experience working with the spreadsheet on the economics. I would have done it myself, but I thought she needed the experience. Where's the advance? I thought it was Dave just trying to make me look bad. I need that. Okay. So some of you may be getting tired of me saying this, but I think it's important. If you calculate, Ken said an 82% wean calf crop, right? We keep back about 15% replacement heifers, give or take. When you get down to it, we don't market but about 65% calves of the cows that we had started with. You with me? And if you do the calculation, about 85% of the feed that we put into producing finished steers or heifers is forage. Okay, so on the feedlot side, we're always thinking we've got a grain issue or a corn price issue, but the fact is we've got a forage issue in the beef industry. It's only about 70% of the cost because the forage tends to be cheaper. What's changed? The ethanol industry. In Nebraska, using like 35% of our corn, increased corn price. Of course, the drought kind of set that off. Going from, see, the first liar doesn't have a chance. Ken had it $1.80. And then, of course, the byproduct. So that's what's changed our lives, right? And those of you in the cow-calf business, it changed your life as well, right? It's not just what it did to the feedlot. Corn price going up, pasture going to corn. Carla mentioned that. That was implied by Ken. So the supply and price of conventional forages has gone up, land prices, abundance of corn residues, right? So we're producing more acres of corn, and corn yields just keep going up, and the amount of residue relative to the corn is pretty constant, so we just keep producing more residue. I don't have it on the slide here, but in Nebraska, and we are blessed to have a lot of corn, irrigated corn, a consistent supply of residue and stuff. But if we did all of the things I thought we could do using residues, we'd still only use about 20% of the corn residue. We produce that much. We just can't use it all in the beef cattle industry. So that's a great opportunity. Okay. So from an economic standpoint then, it seems to me that the easy way to look at this is just to look at the cost of an ingredient by, do we have a pointer? The red button. For a red pointer. See, I catch on so quick. Thank you, Larry. So these are some, the TDN values, which are similar to what Carla showed. In this case, I'm pricing distillers grains on an equal moisture basis at 100% the price of corn, okay? It ran in that range this last year. We'll discuss that a little bit more later. So then this is the price per pound of dry matter, and then the price per pound of TDN. So corn at 14 cents a pound is kind of high priced. So you can look at things, our haze at the prices that I was using are pretty expensive. That's been said today. Ken mentioned you just can't afford that. So what are the ammoniated corn stalks? I think that's going to be discussed tomorrow. But primarily the straw and stalks at 10.3 cents a pound, and the distiller's grains at just over that are the about the least expensive ingredients. That's why we've been using the distiller's grains and the residue, either corn stalks or straw. We think of them somewhat interchangeably. Some other ingredients. I brought corn back in again for comparison. Corn gluten feed, again because of a good TDN value, is a good buy. And at this point, that may be good either as wet or dry. I don't know. That difference in a forage situation may not be very great. Okay. In the feedlot, Erickson keeps saying wetter is better, so that wet distillers have more energy than dry. In our forage feeding situations, we don't see that difference. Okay, so the dry and wet. I think that's about the case with corn gluten feed. So I think that'll fit whether it's wet or dry. Soy hulls aren't as good a buy because I just can't see the energy out of them that we get out of gluten feed. Mids, again, that would be some Kansas State data getting us an energy value. Not bad. You might be able to get a better buy than this. I should indicate, and it's in the paper, that I use feedstuffs prices for like Minneapolis. Usually fits us pretty well. And then rated those prices relative to the price of corn. That's how I came up with those initial prices. And that's going to vary on location. Again, Synergy's a good buy, but you've got to be within trucking distance of Columbus. And the distiller's grains is back on here, and the corn stalks. Okay, so if for us in Nebraska, it's wet distillers and stalks or straw. Okay, well I recognize that not all of you are from Nebraska, and there are parts of Nebraska where it would be more difficult to get wet products. So, and maybe even the residue. So that's why I wanted to give you an idea of different products. A simple way to look at the economics. Okay, so this is a bit of information on how we set up our project. When Ken came to us and said he wanted to do this about 2 years ago, I thought we could get some late calving cows out of one of our herds, and Don Adams said, well, why don't you go down to Maddox? They have a May calving herd, a lot of cows, thousands of cows, and they leave the bulls in, so then they sell the late calvers, and that's what we were looking for, was June calving cows. And so we sourced our cows from them, and you can see what the breed composition is. We started this in April of 2012, so that we were buying bred cows. So I'm doing all of my economics on the basis that you'd be buying in cows, not heifers, buying in cows, and when you cull them, well, you buy in new cows. Okay, it's a simpler way of doing the economics. Plus, I'm not sure about heifer development in the feedlot. That's a whole new ball game. Maybe it would work great. We're just staying away from that. Okay, so you got the system. We're just buying in cows, not heifers. So, Hutch, I thought maybe you needed to see what Nebraska was like, and you wouldn't know about the state. So that's Maddox down here. So half the cows went to Scotts Bluff. Carla keeps whining about being dry out there, so we thought that environment difference could be important. And it is always muddy at Meade in the spring, at least, right? And we made the decision, let's not fight the mud. If you're not going out to grass, it doesn't matter what time of year you calve, right? You're not trying to match it up to the forage resource because we're hauling feed to them. So let's calve in the summer. And I think it's worked well. Dave did a nice job discussing the health issues, and a little mud in July is a good thing, right? So this is north of Lincoln. It's down here. I want to point out two other places on the map because I'll be discussing our Goodmanson Ranch is up in here. I can't get the counties quite right. And that's our Sandhills location that I'll use as a reference point. And then Rick Rasby's herd is the Dalby Halleck herd down here in southeast Nebraska, which would be in a non-irrigated farming area, okay? So those are two reference herds that I'm going to use. So back to the experiment. This has been discussed. I want to just reinforce that. We went with the treatment of using early weaning, and the early weaning, as Rick indicated, before breeding, okay? But that the cows had a little longer interval because we were trying to get them matched up now. And that calving was partially because of the cows that we bought, okay, were spread out a little bit just because of the system. And this is the diet that she showed, roughly 60% wet distiller's grains and 40% straw or stalks. And again, I want to reinforce that they ate the same whether the pairs were together or whether they were separate. Probably everybody in here has been told that that would not happen. That if you wean them, it's more efficient, right? You can't afford to feed the calf through the cow. Okay, our data would say it's just as efficient to leave them together as a pair. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't early wean in some situations. Okay, I'm not as positive about it as Carla and Rick are. Okay. The devil was whispering in my ear, Mike, but I won't say it. I won't say that you could be wrong. Okay, I won't say that. Okay. You see the point? I don't think anybody's ever done this, where you feed the same diet to the weaned cow and calf as you're feeding to the pair. And you're trying to feed them the same amount of feed, and the performance was equivalent. Okay, that says the efficiency was the same. So the idea that we should early wean to save feed, I don't believe is correct. And this is just based on our levels of feeding, is that the dry matter intakes in months after calving, I'm not going to spend time on this, Carla discussed this quite nicely. Let's get on to economics. All right, so I want to discuss 7 systems with you. And Andrea put these into a spreadsheet for me, and GSL is the Goodman Sandhills Laboratory up there at Whitman in the middle of the Sandhills. This is based on a 4-year systems project that Will Griffin used for his PhD. Again, the devil's whispering in my ear, Will, but I'm not going to say anything bad about you, okay? I'll be nice. That's joking with him, okay? He's a nice enough guy. so good, solid systems research at the Goodmanson Ranch, okay? And there's a March, was a March calving herd, a June calving herd, and an August calving herd, okay? These are the inputs, the number of days on grass, that's either summer or winter, the number of days on stalks, hay feeding here, no hay feeding, so this strictly grazing, the kind of thing that I talked about when I started. These are weaning weights. In this case, those days to will are going to look a little long, but what I've done is adjust the days to adjust for the calf's consumption of stalks. Because in both of those treatments, the pairs went to stalks. And listen to this. They did late weaning, not early weaning. What an idea, right? They just left them on the cow until the 1st of April. And you know what? Well, you increase weaning weights, especially in these August calvers, they weren't as old, okay, on April 1st. All right? So I think we've gotten so excited about early weaning that there's some good systems research shows leave them on the cow. They do very nicely, okay? What's the best place to have a calf when you're trying to winter it? Out on corn stalks. What better way to winter them on corn stalks than out there with their mother, okay? Well, that's my logic. We can discuss that. All right. DH is Dalby Halleck Farm. That's Rasby's operation down in southeast Nebraska. And I think that's pretty conventional. Stalks in the winter, calving in the spring, in March and April, hay feeding. What I've got here is distillers grains, and that's, I'm assuming the supplement is distillers, which it basically is at both of those operations, okay? These are my inputs, okay? The weaning weights, the inputs in terms of grazing days, on grass or stalks, hay price, those kinds of things. Okay, now I want to do an extension of the Dalby Halleck. For the last 3 or 4 years, Annie Doors back there, and she started this project, and it was implied by Rick, I believe, about, maybe Carla mentioned it too, about actually supplementing on grass. And so what we've done, and this is on brome, on a cool season grass, okay, so I'm not too worried about range management and a fragile grazing situation. And so what we do is have the number of acres of grass. So we're trying to save grass, which is our short commodity, right? And then we're trying to feed a harvested feed to meet the other half of that need. And so that harvested feed is 30% wet distillers and 70% corn stalks, okay? We start out at a lower level because they want to eat grass and not that much corn stalks, and then we build it up. So we've got a system, but we can give them roughly half of their feed as harvested feed. Sorry. This is the same amount of hay because it's that same Dalby Halleck system, but here we've got stalks and distillers grains instead of the amount of pasture. Okay, that's our system. So that's kind of a tweener system. So we're feeding them, but we're not putting them in confinement. Okay, so what you've been waiting for is our confinement system. This is 365 days a year. That's the stalks and distillers that we're feeding, based on the diet and the amounts that I showed in the previous graph, and similar to what Carla was showing. Okay, so we got all this corn residue. Absolutely, the best way to use that is with grazing, right? So I can still maintain that philosophy that it's cheaper to let the cow harvest it than bale it up, haul it in, grind it, get it into the diet, right? Plus the cow's selective. She's eating the best 15 to 20% of what's out there and leaving the worst, okay? That's a great system. Okay, so now what I've designed is what I call a confinement stock system, where the cows are 6 months in the feedlot in the summer and 6 months on corn stalks in the winter. Calving in July, turning out on corn stalks as soon after corn is harvested, as soon after the 1st of October as we can get them out, and getting back in the day they bring the soybean drill or planter to the field, right? And no-till, we're going to pull the cows off that morning. That's kind of a joke, but you see what I mean, as late as possible. So 6 months and 6 months. Think about this now. It's just backwards of the way we've thought about cows, Kenny, back in the old days that you were talking about, where you graze grass in the summer and you feed them harvested feed in the winter, right? And so we're talking now just doing it the opposite. Graze corn stalks in the winter and feed the harvested feed in the summer. And so these are the inputs. Again, the stock days are more than 180 because I'm accounting for the calves that are out there with the cows. My weaning weights now are 100 pounds heavier because in our confinement system, we're weaning in January. Here, I'm leaving the calf on the cow until first to the middle of April. This is my base prices. Grass, $40 per pair per month. Somebody will say, well, I know, I've heard up to $50, $60, $70. I understand. This is what our Ag Econ people have reported for this year, that's the average rental rate for a pair. And that's $1.33 a day. I'm doing things on a daily basis. Corn stalk grazing, I got at 60 cents per head per day. Distillers grains, my base price was $190 per ton of dry matter. That's the 10.5 cents. That's pricing it at 100% the price of corn, which it ran this last year. That can't be right. I made a mistake, sorry, on this slide. Okay, the hay is much more expensive than that. So I don't know where that came from, but it's wrong. Anyway, the baled straw or stalks, I've got at $80 per ton. Ground, ready to go into the feed truck, and that includes some loss, shrink in grinding. That's 44.4 cents a pound. I'm charging cows 10 cents a day for taking care of them. If you look at the footnote, I've upped that to 20 if they're being supplemented out on a pasture grazing situation, pasture or stalks. And then I've got 45 cents a day for feedlot yardage. We can debate that forever, okay? But that's what I used. I'm just charging $10 a head for mineral, leaving that out of it and just using distillers as my supplement. Okay. I realize that's not on the slide. I'm doing pretty much a partial budget, but I'm using cow cost of $200 a year for just owning the cow and $50 a year for getting her bred, okay? And we're just using natural service, okay? So I've got $250 on top of these costs, okay? All right, these are, then what I've done is calculated the break-even price for the calves. This is both heifer and steer calves because in our system, we're not keeping any replacement heifers. We're selling everything into the market. Not a great deal of difference. This June system is a little bit better. And if you think about these prices, if that averages $1.45, and Ken, if even if it was $1.65 for steer and heifer calves, that's 20 cents a pound times 500 is $100. Jay, you're making $100 a head on your cows anyway. So my point is, I think we're in a he said, yeah, I'm making a lot more. Well, anyway, you see my point? I think the figures are in a realistic range, okay? Dolby-Halleck was right in there as well. Okay, now I've gone to just the June Goodmanson to represent the Sandhills. That's a pretty good system, pretty competitive. Okay, I think it's about as good as we can do in a conventional system. The Dolby-Halleck with the cows supplemented, replacing half the grass, the confinement, and then the confinement stock situation. Okay, so with the base prices, this doesn't look real good, does it? 365 days a year in the feedlot doesn't cut it. Now, Ken never told us that we should do that. He said partial confinement. We didn't listen to him. We said, let's find out what happens. Carla mentioned this. What are the problems if you pen them up? Okay? Quite frankly, when I got to this point, I said, you know, there have got to be good alternatives, and so I kind of like the confinement stock alternative. This is pretty competitive, okay? The difference here is, I remember I said that I had distillers priced at 100% the price of corn. For the preceding 2, 3, 4 years, distillers would be priced maybe 85% the price of corn. Last year it went to 100 to 105, okay? What's it going to be this year with $5 corn or $4.50 corn or $4 corn? I don't know. I'm just giving you a what if. But if we price it at 85% of $5 corn, was this clear to you that my base price was $5 corn? Okay, it is now, okay? So 85% of $5 corn doesn't change these systems where it's just a small supplement, but it changes the cow system. Then I came down and looked at 85% of $4 corn. I thought that's as low as distillers would get this year. This system looks pretty good on that. It helps the confinement system, but it doesn't become really competitive with these more conventional systems. Okay. Then I've got this same reference point of 85.5, 85% the price of corn at $5 a bushel. You've seen that line before. I just brought it along for comparison. This is what happens if grass goes up to $50 an acre rent. Okay? Well, obviously it increases this considerably for these grazing situations. It doesn't match up with the confinement, but I'll tell you what, the Dolby-Halleck supplement thing, it becomes more competitive, right? Because what's happening? Grass is going up, but our distillers and stocks hasn't gone up, right? So it's fairly obvious. Jay, you're shaking your head. It was fairly obvious. I didn't actually need to explain it, right? Okay. The confinement in stocks looks really good in that scenario. And what I did is I took grass up until it essentially broke even with the confinement. You with me? So is grass going to get to $72 a pair? I've heard those stories, right? See? I had to use published data, and you guys are telling me that it's way past it. That's what they're telling me up front here. Well, you see the point, don't you? But because it's gone up, as I started my presentation, it's because of supply and demand, right? We don't have enough green grass, right? How many times have you heard somebody, maybe me, say, well, what else would we do with the sandhills, right? The problem is, it's not what else would we do with it. We don't have enough of it, right? We're just short on grass. I didn't think I would live that long until we would be short on grass, okay? So it makes these other systems look competitive. Not for everybody. We want to use all of that grass. Anyway, this just shows, again, keeping that same line along, this shows what happens if you increase the price of stalks to 115. Stalks and straw were pretty expensive last year, right? Because there wasn't any hay at any price, right? So the straw and stalks bailed us out with the drought. I don't know what it's going to be this year. We're going to have, the supply is going to be great, right? Because we got all that corn. I don't know what it's going to cost. If stalks are expensive, then it makes these systems look less competitive with our conventional systems. I'm going to finish with this. Is it clear that I like grazing stalks? Did I make that clear enough? So we've got about 15 years of data where we've grazed corn stalks on this field. It's a corn-soybean rotation, so it gets grazed every other year, then it's in soybeans the next year. We graze in the fall-winter months. We've grazed in this spring for that amount of time. So those corn producers who think you're going to ruin their crop the following year, that's what we were trying to test. This is what happens. Soybeans, this is after winter grazing. It's the same direction. This is statistically different, that you actually increase the soybean crop by grazing. Do you realize now, you cattlemen, some of your corn farmers too, we're producing more residue than we can manage out there. So many farmers are disking it, which is not a good thing, right? So taking some off by grazing or some harvest is a good thing, okay? That's why we actually got an increase in soybean yields, because of more residue than we need on the field. And corn the following year then is still increased a little bit by taking some residue off. It goes the same direction with spring grazing. I don't have that slide, but so grazing in the spring, and it's always muddy, Dave, in the spring in Meade, Nebraska, right? And it does not ruin the soil. So options for harvest are corn silage, and we're feeding some corn silage this year because you get pretty good quality roughage that way, and it's a way to harvest. I thought we couldn't afford to feed the corn, but maybe we can. Baled stalks, husklage, I like I get teased a lot about liking corn cobs, but I like the cobs and husk. The husk is the most digestible part. I think there's options there, and some combination of husklage and stalks. There's ways to harvest that. I won't go into that. Feeding options. The silage is very flexible. Ammoniated stalks or straw works best on straw because you can do it in the summer. You can feed without grinding, and that makes that more economical. Again, that'll probably be discussed tomorrow. And so these stalks, husklage, needing to be ground, but the wet distillers and limit feeding is what makes that work. If that's not clear from what Carla said, you can get them to eat the straw and stalks if you put wet distillers, or in her case, the wet distillers and wet beet pulp with it, okay? It's 365 days a year is expensive. unless you're paying the $72 for grass, right? And some of you are telling me that some people are doing that. So that's the point, right? What's pasture going to cost? What's land price going to go to, Ken? That's been our discussion today, right? Where's the industry going to go? I like the confinement stock system. I think it's got great potential. Parts of that have been done. The GSL work with both the June and August calving herds, the pairs were on stalks. They bred on stalks. That worked very nicely. They've got the data, the cows rebred, all of that, okay? That part of the system has been done. And we've done the confinement thing for 1.5 years now. We just haven't put those two together, but I think we probably will. We think that's got a lot of potential. And that's the same beef web page. I'm ready for discussion, Larry.